How would you feel if a salesperson busts down your door at the privacy of your own home, barking at you about its latest products or services? Well, isn't that what radio advertising essentially is? People trying to sell us something even when we're at the leisure of our home or inside the car. Welcome to the second video in this 5-part series, Radio Advertising. Fun fact: before the birth of music streaming services like Pandora and Spotify, radio stations were the first to come up with the idea of having listeners pay to remove commercials through a subscription model. Radio broadcasting in the US started in the late 1910s, featuring a variety of programs like quiz shows, game shows, where you can win prizes, and even soap opera. It's like TV before the existence of TV, where the entire family would gather around to listen to the next anticipated episode of their favorite program, or share laughter over that Sunday quiz show they never seemed to guess correctly. But the fundings for these programs gotta come from somewhere, right? Yep, it's all owned and funded by the sole owner of the show. And as the saying goes, the gratuitous service cannot continue indefinitely, thus advertising was inevitable. Various financing alternatives were proposed but never implemented. One example is of an orchestra leader named Dulio Scherbo, who proposed that he and his orchestra will be on standby ready to play anything upon the request of a paying customer over the telephone. Another example was to scramble the signals for non-paying listeners unless they buy a special filter and attach it to the radio to filter out the noise. The idea of radio advertising was so controversial and the proposals proved impractical that it took nearly a decade before the first radio commercial was aired in the August of 1922 by AT&T. The early commercials weren't as hard-selling as they are today, like, "Hey, you should buy this now before the offer is over." Instead, the advertisers sponsored the entire program and were mentioned merely by name, such as, "We thank our sponsors for making this program possible." And that's it. Just name mentioning, and an effort to not offend the listeners at the comfort of their home. If you listen to the radio commercials during the early years, they sounded so boring. No music, just a person talking. It wasn't until many years later when people started experimenting with different formats and using sound effects. There are 3 primary ways which you can advertise on the radio: produced spot, live read, and on-air sponsorship. Produced spot is a reserved spot in the daypart or schedule when the radio station runs your ad. They are the typical commercials you hear after a series of songs played or between news coverages. Here's an example of a daypart where you get to choose the time of the day when you want to advertise. Live read is when the show host or DJ makes mention of your business to endorse your products or services from a script you provided, or through personal experience as a testimonial. A few statistics from the Radio Advertising Bureau show that 75% of listeners tune in when their favorite personality is on the air. 52% of them have their opinions influenced by them, and 51% of the listeners actually purchased or considered making a purchase of the products or services endorsed by their favorite personality. Live read advertising can either be more expensive or cheaper than the typical produced spot advertising. On-air sponsorship. This can either be pre-recorded or live read by the host or DJ. Examples of on-air sponsorship can be found during a news, traffic, or weather report, such as, "This weather report is brought to you by company name." It's a brief 5 to 10 second mention of your business name and maybe even your company motto. Okay, a full disclosure before we move on. Unlike print advertising, where you get to see the exact pricing and format of your ad, there is no ad rate card for radio advertising. Like the stock market, the price for advertising on the radio fluctuates constantly. There is no set price, so the numbers that you will see later are merely estimates. I tried, but everywhere I searched, I met with a page similar to this. And since I don't run a company, I can't. The only way to know for sure is to contact the radio station's sales representatives. The cost of running a radio advertisement depends on several factors. Ad production. Unlike print advertising, your prospects are not engaged visually. It's like being a salesperson, you need to sound convincing, and you only have a few seconds to make that happen. An ad production involves hiring a copywriter to write a script, a musician to write a jingle, a voice talent for a voiceover, because, let's be honest here, if you cast somebody with a boring voice like mine, you're bound to drive your customers away and lose some serious business. And lastly, somebody who can do all of the post-production editing so the volume of your ad sounds balanced. The total cost of production can range from $1,500 to $3,000. But good news! Most radio stations are willing to produce your ad for free as long as you have a script. But the result is probably just a voiceover with stock music or no music at all. Station rating. Once you have your ad produced, you need to choose a radio station that fits your target audience. The demographic and the number of listeners tuned to that particular station will affect the rate of the ad. You will come across terms like average quarter hour, AQH, which means the average number of people listening to a particular station for at least 5 consecutive minutes during a 15-minute period. And coverage map, which details the area of service the radio signal is able to reach, similar to the term circulation in print advertising. The larger the market, the more expensive, but don't assume that a large radio station will always yield the highest return. For example, if you're advertising as a nanny or a personal chef, you would want to advertise on a station that plays adult contemporary music with a demographic between the age of 30 to 50. It would probably do you no good to advertise to a bunch of hipsters listening to the top 40 contemporary hits unless you just invented a really dope app. Daypart. A daypart is the standard division of a 24-hour day into 5 segments for scheduling commercials: morning drive time, midday, afternoon drive time, evening, and overnight. The morning drive time and afternoon drive time are considered the prime time, when the rate of advertising and the number of listeners are at the highest. The midday, evening, and overnight are considered the fringe time, when the rate of advertising and the number of listeners during these hours are much lower. In fact, the rate for overnight advertising can be 4 times lower than advertising during a prime time. By default, your airtime is left to the discretion of the radio station through a method called run of schedule. If you want your ad to run at a particular time or with a specific program, you will need to pay a premium for a fixed position. Length. You can run your ad by 10, 15, 30, or 60 seconds. The longer it is, the more expensive. A 15-second commercial allows you enough time to mention your business name, products or services, and contact details. A 30-second commercial is the more popular alternative and can be presented as a monologue or a conversation. You should have enough time to hit all the highlights and benefits. A 60-second commercial allows you enough time to complete your sales pitch by identifying the problem, offering a solution, and providing testimonials. When considering the length of your ad, you should always save an 8 to 10 second space at the end to mention your business address, phone number, or website. A 15-second commercial is usually reserved for well-known businesses. Frequency versus reach. Frequency is the number of times a person listens to your ad. An analogy of this is like a person talking to the same group of people a lot. Reach is the number of people who listen to your ad. An analogy of this is like a person talking to a lot of different people. With a limited budget, do you want to reach 100 people and have them hear your ad 10 times? Or do you want to expose 1,000 people to your ad with a single run? I mean, if you do the math, let's take a 30-second ad for example. There are 86,400 seconds in a day. If we divide that by 30, that means the chance of your ad being heard by a specific person is 1 in 2,880. Unless you can grow money on the tree, you usually have to sacrifice one for another. In radio advertising, frequency is the name of the game. Not everyone is a potential customer, so you don't have to try to reach everybody. Just focus on advertising with one radio station. 2152 schedule. Most businesses fail their radio advertising campaign because they are not committed to advertising for a long period of time. The general consent in the field of radio advertising is to run your ads 3 times a day, 21 ads a week, for 52 consecutive weeks. This will greatly raise brand awareness for your business. Days of the week. Running ads over the weekend is generally cheaper than the weekdays because there's less traffic on the street, so less people tuning in to the radio. Competition. Supply and demand will drive the prices up. The presidential election is an example where you would have to compete with the various political campaigns for a spot on the air. Frequency discount. When you sign a lengthy contract with a radio station, you get to enjoy a discount to running your ads. Volume discount. When you commit to one of the tiers listed in the contract, you get to enjoy some form of discount. The more money you invested, the steeper the discount. For example, if I invested $10,000, I get an 8% discount. If the rate for a 30-second ad during the morning drive is $100, my discounted rate will be $92 for a 30-second ad. With $10,000, I'm able to advertise 109 times during the morning drive time with a 30-second ad. Since the radio advertising rate fluctuates constantly, it's worth a consideration to lock in the price with a contract. Negotiation. Negotiation is key. Part of the fun and frustration regarding radio advertising is that there are no set prices for advertising. Instead, you get to haggle with sales representatives to agree to meet in the middle by shopping around first to compare the rates. Also, make sure to ask for the new advertiser discount to see if they offer such promotion. Calling a sales representative can be intimidating if you're not sure what questions to expect. So I've compiled a few questions below that you can be prepared for. What is your budget? What demographic are you targeting? What's the length of your ad? How many spots are you running a day? What are your campaign flight dates, meaning your start and end date for your campaign? Are there any Daypart restrictions, or can the spots run 24/7? In other words, run off schedule or fixed position. Additional costs. By simply advertising, there is no way of knowing how many of your new customers heard about you on the radio. But you can learn to track your leads with the following 2 methods. Vanity URL. A vanity URL is a short, memorable, customized link that redirects users to another landing page. For example, your website may be www.yourwebsite.com. That might be too long to remember. An alternative is to condense that to www.yourweb.com. If the radio station you're advertising on is called Worst 100, you can name the URL to www.yourweb.com/worst100. If you are offering a special promotion only to your listeners, you can name it to www.yourweb.com/10% to get a 10% discount. A domain name will typically cost less than $15 a month. Call tracking number. Another way of following your lead is with a call tracking number. This number is different from your everyday number and is created so you're able to track it back to your radio ad campaign. A call tracking number will typically cost around $30 a month. Other forms of advertising. Other forms of advertising on the radio include sponsorship, giveaway, interview, and cross-promotion. This passage on one of the articles that I read perfectly summarizes me in how I made a fool of myself on various forums and emails when I asked naive questions such as, "Oh hello, does anyone know what the average cost is for advertising on the radio?" They laughed. I was embarrassed. Despite all that, I still managed to dig out some examples that you can refer to. Aside from the normal radio broadcast, most radio stations also have the online streaming feature. Some stations will run your ads for free as part of a package. You can even advertise on their websites and social medias. The lead time or reservation deadline is usually a few days before the actual airing. But when there's an election or a big holiday right around the corner, you can expect your ad campaign to be delayed as the market will be saturated with ads. Remnant space advertising. Remnant spaces are the leftover inventory the radio station has not been able to sell. These spots can be purchased at up to 80% off the original price. When talking about radio advertising, these remnant spaces are usually on the weekends or overnight spots when there are fewer listeners. So, what is the outlook for radio advertising? Is it still worth your time and money? According to a 2018 report released by Nielsen Audio, 93% of adults still listen to the radio each week, compared to 88% who watch TV. It's able to reach 243 million listeners on a monthly basis. However, a 2016 report from Edison Research also revealed that listeners change stations at least 22 times per commute. Another research conducted by Pandora Radio showed that 7 out of 10 people change stations when commercials are playing. This means you would have to advertise on more than just one radio station. Radio pros. So what are the perks for advertising on the radio? Affordability. It depends on the market really. Advertising in big cities like New York could cost you as much as $500 for a 60-second ad, or as little as $5 per minute in small towns. The key word here is frequency, because unlike print advertising, your listeners don't get a second chance to hear your ad unless you run it continuously. Ease of production. This one really depends too. If you want the radio station to produce your commercial for free, then all you need is a copywriter to write you a well-convincing script. Effective targeting. Contact the radio station sales representative to find out about the general demographic. They will advise you on whether products or services are a good fit to their listeners' needs. Front and center. Being able to capture someone's full attention for 30 to 60 seconds is gold. Focus on local customers. The reach of your ad is limited by the radio station's coverage map, so your listeners are most likely local residents. Negotiable price. When there isn't much competition in the market, you can try to haggle for a lower price. Be sure to shop around first to compare the rates. Establish trust. 52% of listeners can have their opinions influenced by their favorite personalities. That's either very creepy or very remarkable. Studies have shown that live read have a recall and response rate higher than the typical recorded spot. The audience is more likely to trust what they say. Promotions. People love to save. It's proven to be more effective than just advertising. Radio cons. So, what are the disadvantages for advertising on the radio? Distraction. Many people listen to the radio while multitasking. They're either doing work, exercising, or driving, so they might only hear part of your ad. Short retention. If you only run your ad once and people didn't catch everything you say, it's gone forever. Ad skipping. After listening to a block of songs or a lengthy news program, listeners anticipate a string of commercials to follow, so they change stations. If the statistic is correct and 70% of listeners skip commercials, then your ad campaign becomes very costly and ineffective. Product description. Because there is no visual component when advertising on the radio, it can be very challenging to describe a product or services with words. If you're selling jewelry, there are only so many ways you can say the word shiny. Tracking ROAS. It's difficult to track where your customers are coming from unless you go out of your way to create a Vanity URL or buy a call tracking number to track your leads, both of which are not provided by the radio station. Okay, I believe we've covered everything we needed to know about radio advertising. In the third part of the series, we will be covering TV advertising. If you are interested in advertising on the radio station, keep in mind that the radio is a frequency medium. It's much more effective to have 100 people listening to your ad 10 times than to have 1,000 people listening to your ad just once and forgetting about it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.